welcome back to my channel of the Everyday Life of Aspie. If you're new, I'm Aspie. I'm all about creating mental health and awareness and sharing my life stories with autism, mental health and tips and advice along the way, as well as also in saying this, advocating and educating you all on these conditions. If you're into any of these, feel free to smash the subscribe button on the bottom right hand corner, and in saying this, feel free to turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. As you're aware, basically I am doing these interview like questions for you all that has been willing to come on and do an icebreaker for others to raise awareness and understanding based on your conditions, because obviously sometimes there are always misunderstanding about what it is all about, or some form of misconceptions, as well as stereotyping and stigmatism based on these everyday conditions, be it if it's through the mental health or just the general health, or also for your chronic illnesses that you go through on a daily. So that's why I'm here today, to try and abolish all these and hopefully share these around to family, friends and whoever worldwide, so that we can gain a better understanding. So I want to take the time out right now to thank Jesse from Eagle Eye Gaming for coming onto the show, or shall we say onto my channel, just to briefly address what he's going to share today. And obviously I'm saying this, I know that it's not easy obviously for some of us, and I give you a high praise, high hands five for you right now, Jesse, and many others that has done this, because obviously we need to just brave it out and hope for the best that everything will come through. So the link to his channel and everything else that I will think of right now will be listed in the description below. So if you want to go over to his channel to show your support or watch his videos or what have you, feel free to do so after this video. And after doing this, say Aspie has sent you over, so that he knows that who it was from that has shouted him out, as well as a interviewee like kind of video as well. So once again, thank you, Jesse. So let's roll on the questions. The first question was, what is the name of the condition you are diagnosed with? What is it known as? And if there's any common names for it.
How's it going, everybody? My name is Eagle Eye Gaming. I am excited to be here on the Life of Aspie. She has kindly invited me to come on and do an interview with you guys. So thank you, Miss Life of Aspie, for having me on your channel, and I'm excited to jump into this. So my diagnosis is called PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, which happens after a traumatic event in your life has happened. So generally when people hear PTSD, they tell me, oh, well, you must be military. Yes, I am military, and yes, that's where it came from, but it's not so anybody can be diagnosed with this mental disorder. However, I do most commonly see it in military veterans. When I left the military, a lot of civilians I've met have struggled with PTSD as well. Again, it's caused from...
Explain to us today, what are the causes and triggers for the condition?
There's not really a one-shot trigger for the entire situation. Everybody's going to have a different set of triggers, or a different set of things that cause them to feel uncomfortable during that. And what that stems back to is what traumatic event caused you to have the PTSD in the first place. So, like somebody who was in a car wreck, or somebody along the lines of a car wreck, would have anxiety around cars, possible uncomfortableness, possible panic attacks when they come to getting into vehicles, moving, and they might not like driving so much. Well, that would be considered a trigger to them. But somebody who deployed might not like fireworks or loud sounds or loud bangs, or people coming up real close to them. That's a different set of triggers. So with each individual case, it's a little bit different. In my case, I would venture to say that fireworks were one of the biggest things that I would consider one of my triggers, because they're loud, they're unexpected, I couldn't control that, and that noise caused me to flash back into a memory that I was trying to avoid. So I've had time to work with my own PTSD issues, and really a lot of my triggers don't bother me anymore, but there are still the occasional times where if I'm caught off guard, that is still a trigger that will bring back the memory. So some of us have gotten it to the point where we can kind of function on it, and then others have just started out. So if you're just starting out, I would suggest actually going to find a counselor or somebody to help you kind of work through those triggers. But when it comes right down to the flat point, there is no one-shot trigger. Like myself, like I said, I had a problem with fireworks. Fireworks were a big one for me. And then it was large crowds and so on and so forth. And I've dealt with each one of those by kind of just throwing myself into the situation with a group of friends or a group of people I'm comfortable with, and that seems to have gotten it to where, okay, I can enjoy the fact that this is going on without having all of this come back. So a trigger would be anything that causes you to flash back to that event or causes your brain to remember that event. It doesn't have to necessarily be a noise. A simple emotion can do it as well. So when you're having a trigger and it's emotional based, like say you were anxious during the time the event happened that caused the PTSD, if you get anxious, that can cause a whole flurry of other emotions because of the fact that that is something that is related to the traumatic event that's happened to you or happened to that person during the time. So, like I said, the broad spectrum, there's no one-shot trigger. Everybody's going to be unique. Everybody's case is going to be a little bit different. Everybody's got something that's happened that caused the event in their mind to be a traumatic event. So, for that to be said that, oh well, I've got explosions here, and that will trigger anybody with PTSD. That's not necessarily the case. An explosion doesn't always do it. A loud noise won't always do it. Sometimes it's just a raw emotion. So again, the triggers are basically, to answer this question, basically anything that relates to the event that has happened can be considered a trigger. It could be a possible thing that sets off the mood swings, the behavioral changes, the avoidance issues. It could just flash you back to the memory, so on and so forth. So, like I was saying, anything that, when it comes to PTSD, anything that reminds you or brings you back to that event could be considered something that would be a trigger. It might not be exactly a trigger off the bat, but when it comes down to it, it could be a possible trigger. So the things to watch for is when you're flashing back into those emotions or you have that memory come back, is try to focus on what's going on around you that's causing you to go back to that. That would be where you start to really realize what your triggers are. Like mine was very much the big bang from a firework. When a firework went off, it was because I wasn't expecting it. I couldn't figure out where it was, and I had to actually sit down and focus and go, okay, this is the emotions I'm feeling. This is what I'm processing, and with that being the case, this is something that I know now is a trigger. So then it's up to the next step of going to find help to kind of beat that trigger.
What are the signs and symptoms for this condition you're going to clearly explain to us today?
Okay, so when it comes to the signs and symptoms of PTSD, there's three real things that I've noticed are kind of big: avoidance, behavioral changes, and mood changes or mood swings. And the funny part about it is all of those signs are more relatable to anger outburst or depression than they are to PTSD. However, when it comes to behavioral changes, what I mean by behavioral changes is like changes of habits. As human beings, we're creatures of habit. We do things out of habit. We go to the grocery store out of habit, and also necessity. But we make a habit of how we go about doing that. And when you start changing your habits, that's what I mean by behavioral changes. Because like before, I would go to the grocery store on my own, and now I go with somebody else because I'm not comfortable enough to go on my own. So little things like that in behavioral changes is where you're going to see those symptoms kind of pop out. Mood swings don't happen to me nearly as much. I do have a tendency to go kind of up and down, but it really takes me not paying attention to what would trigger a mood swing. So, and by trigger I mean just cause or enlighten that mood swing. But when it comes to the mood swings, typically I've seen a lot of people go from 0 to 100 in angry forms more so than depressed forms, but it can go either way, really. When it comes to the anger outbursts, I'm not the person who can say that I've witnessed people physically go after anything, but you will notice that people with PTSD sometimes will get irritated over small things that don't make sense to other people as to why they're getting irritated. And really that's just that mental disorder kicking in because they're trying to work something out, and that situation is causing it to bring back a memory or bring back a feeling of something that happened during that traumatic event, which will cause that mood change to start kicking in. And the other one that I've really noticed is avoidance. Avoidance is a huge one that I fight with. Like I said, when you go to the grocery store, if you start avoiding going to the grocery store, or avoiding family members, or avoiding driving, or avoiding going out and doing things like that, those are kind of the big signs that something's off. Because from what I've noticed, people like myself who suffer with PTSD will start to avoid these things that make them uncomfortable, or make them not want to be in that situation, or make them remember, just in general, remember the situation that has caused the mental disorder to be there. So those are my 3 signs that I've really noticed. I can't tell you honestly the rest of them. I'm sure there's other ones, but those are the 3 big ones that I've noticed.
How and when were you diagnosed?
Well, I was actually diagnosed back in 2015 when I exited the military with PTSD, and the diagnosis came because when you exit the military, as protocol, you have to go through a mental and physical evaluation, and during that mental and physical evaluation is when they noticed that I had the signs and the symptoms of PTSD, and therefore that's where my diagnosis came from.
How do you treat your condition or manage it on the daily?
Okay, so for this question, it's kind of interesting because I've second-natured most of how I deal with PTSD, just because I've worked with it for so long now that it's not really a running factor in my life. It's not something that dictates how I live my life, or what I'm going to do, or where I'm going to go, or so on and so forth. When it comes down to PTSD, if I have a trigger or something that's happening in that moment, I've gotten to the point where I can kind of consciously be aware that that's happening, and then just by being aware of it, or being in that situation and going, okay, this is causing this emotion, this is causing that, I can redirect it with another thought that says, okay, well, that's no longer the case. And typically that'll calm me down and get me back to just being able to do what I was doing in the first place. So, like grocery shopping, if I went out grocery shopping or anything like that, I used to get really anxious and really uptight and not want to be in that situation. And it was because there was so many variables that I couldn't control. So now when I go out and I go grocery shopping, I'm a little more comfortable because, yeah, I can't control those variables, but the one variable I always have control on is me and how I'm going to react to that situation. So knowing that has helped me to, if I'm standing in a line and I'm like, oh God, this person's too close, or there's too many people around me, and I don't know what's going on, it's as simple as going, well, okay, that's all happening, yes, but you still have control as to how you're going to react in the situation. If something does happen, you have the full control to make the conscious decision to do this. And that thought right there will throw it back into, okay, I can just kind of go back to doing what I was doing, because now I'm back to comfortable. I have my control here, and all of this is just null and void now. So the answer to how I manage my PTSD on a day-to-day basis might actually surprise you, but it's not a one-person battle, and that's the big thing that I had to break down and learn, is that having the help of other people there really makes a difference. So I was lucky enough to have a support group that was willing to work with me, and my family has been really close with working with me as well. So it became a more notable thing that while working with PTSD, I would trigger, and I wouldn't realize I would trigger, or I wouldn't realize that something was going on. And by having that support group on a daily basis, when something's going on that I'm not noticing, we've all kind of functioned and learned to just kind of go, okay, you're acting this way. What's going on? Why are you acting this way? And then that takes the time to get me to sit back and go, oh, hang on, something's off. Let me reprocess that and kind of mellow it out. So it's a really good support group, and that is one of my biggest suggestions for dealing with PTSD, is to have a support group that's there that you can trust. It's made it very, very manageable to say the least. Like I said, I don't really notice if it affects me as much during the day, because I've got people who are consistently telling me, hey, something's wrong, something's up, you need to, are you okay, is something going on, yada yada yada, things like that. So I've dealt with it in the sense that I've learned to kind of accept the fact that I have it, and accept the fact that I know my triggers and know how to kind of to push the thought in there to make that trigger change. But at the same time, I've got that backup group of support that sits there and goes, okay, you're not aware of it yet, so let's make you aware. And being aware of it is my way of combating or managing it.
What are the everyday
So,
struggles you struggle with
when it comes
on a
down
daily
to how it
with this
affects my
condition,
life
and
on a daily
actually
basis,
help
it
you
really
out?
doesn't anymore, which is kind of nice. The only thing I can say that it does affect is my sleep pattern, because unfortunately when you're sleeping, you don't have control like that over your brain. And for those of you who do, kudos to you, because I don't. But when it comes right down to it, no, I've dealt with PTSD because my life's always been one of those things where I'm not going to let something dictate how I'm going to live my life. So just because it was there, that was that cue that, okay, I need to learn how to deal with this, and I need to learn how to push through this. So learning to interject the emotion or the physical aspect with a thought process that can change how your emotions would react is how I've learned to really combat with PTSD. Now, there are some situations, such as like fireworks, where I will sit there and I'm uncomfortable, and understanding the fact that those are fireworks and they're not going to hurt me, or they're not going to do anything, doesn't always work. Sometimes I do still have to get up and remove myself from the situation, only to come back to it. But the biggest way that I've combated PTSD is to find what it was that was triggering me, and then go and face it head on and deal with it with a new thought process. Try and find a new light to what it is that it's triggering. So fireworks and things like that, they're fireworks, they're fun, they're explosives. That's how it is. I don't want to be close to them, but I can be around them. And that's that okay middle ground. And that's pretty much where I've learned to deal with it, is finding that okay middle ground. And then when I'm on that middle ground, I'm good to just continue doing what I was doing.
Has your condition ever stopped you from doing the things that you love? If so, what are they?
So for this question, the honest answer is yes, it did, and now it doesn't. So the thing that it interfered with, or that I stopped doing because of PTSD and how it affected my life, was driving. I really, really enjoyed driving. Like, I'm not... There's no joke in between. If there was an excuse to get in a car and go out and just drive on the road, I was taking it. And I was that guy that would go to the store at 3 o'clock in the morning just because I get to drive a car. Yay! So when I got out and the PTSD had set in, I became more and more uncomfortable with being in a vehicle, and I just kept pushing that off and was like, I'll deal with it whenever, and it'll just go away. Well, it never really went away. It just progressively got worse because I kept ignoring it. So it came down to probably about 6 or 8 months ago before I was really able to start driving, and there was a period of a year, maybe a year and a half, where I wouldn't get in a car, like wouldn't get in it at all. And then now I've started with just getting back in and letting somebody else drive and being more comfortable with that, and then got back up to driving the car and understanding that I still am in control of this specific vehicle that I'm driving. And once I kind of started dealing with what was kicking off those emotions and the things that were sending the flashbacks into my brain that were interrupting my love of driving, it became a little easier to deal with it over time and kind of build back up to having that enjoyment back in my life. So now, yes, I can get in a car and I can go drive and do basically whatever I want to do because I've learned to deal with that.
What are the myths and misconceptions?
So the downside to PTSD is that it's not curable. There's no one shot, hey, you're fixed. It doesn't work that way. Once you have it, it's a part of you. It's who you are, kind of. It's just like another little piece that's in there that's like, oh yeah, you met my buddy there? Okay. So With PTSD, the cool thing about it is it's very, very manageable if you're willing to really sit down and focus on it and learn your triggers and learn what happens and learn what sets you off. But really, there's no one shot cure. So on a daily management, it's easier to kind of deal with, in my opinion. Like driving is, you just got to learn that driving caused me to go back to a memory that I didn't want to re-experience. So with that being the case, I had to learn that that memory is that memory, and then I can disassociate from emotional connections to that memory, so that way it just stays a memory. Occasionally, yes, it will come up, and then it's just a matter of injecting that thought that says, hey, this isn't my thing, this isn't what's going on anymore, so you are in control. And with that being the case, it's become manageable, it's become something I can deal with. But as for a one-shot misconception that I still hear today, which is funny because it's been disproven and it isn't just a myth, it's like medically proven that it can happen, is that, oh, you're military, so you have to have PTSD. And that's acceptable. Military people can have PTSD. But if you're a civilian, I've noticed that it's very much, well, you can't have PTSD. You didn't go through that. You don't know what that's like. Only military people have PTSD. Well, no, not necessarily. And really, no, not at all. But when it comes down to it, that is the biggest misconception that I consistently hear people tell me, is that, oh, well, PTSD is only military. Well, no, PTSD is anybody who's been through a traumatic event. It can happen to anybody. It can happen to a 5-year-old if the event is traumatic enough. So to say that it's only limited to being in the military, be it whatever country you're from, is completely wrong. A civilian can get it, and that's the thing that I wish that people would understand a little bit more, and that misconception wasn't as heavy, but it still seems to be, to this day, one of the biggest misconceptions that I consistently hear.
Are there any benefits towards the condition that you'll be sharing?
So that's kind of an interesting question, in a way that it's relative. It's relative to each case. Some people would say no, and then there's people like me who say, yeah, there are a couple benefits to having PTSD. And so let me take a second and explain that. Where I say there's benefits, it's because I've now learned that I have to always be aware of my surroundings, and that's a benefit to me, because I usually don't miss what's going on. And the other benefit is too, it's caused me to not only see things one way, but then to get another opinion on it, where before I would just be consistently stuck in my own head and this is the way it is and that's how it is. So beneficially, I've learned to open up to other ideas through it. And that's kind of been a huge benefit to me. Now, where other people might not have benefits is in the same aspect. The triggers might be something that they haven't learned how to control that, or learned how to maybe go, hey, I saw this as this. Is this what you think it is? And it might be in a more severe case for somebody else than it is for me. So for me, it's not unmanageable, which is the big deal there. But at the same time, I can find benefits in it. Whereas somebody who has a severe case of it to the point where they don't want to come out, or they're afraid to even be around people, or a simple dropping of a pan will send them on the floor, that's a completely different story, and I can't vouch to say there's benefits to it. Maybe he can say there's benefits that says, hey, well, at least I'm always self-aware of the fact that I might live. I don't know. But for me, yes, I would say there are some benefits to my specific case, because I've learned to be more aware of how I perceive things. And that's a huge deal to me. I don't want to perceive things the wrong way. I don't want to offend something by perceiving it one way, and it really was meant to be just a nice person giving me a cup of coffee, if that makes sense. So for that being the case, yeah, this question's kind of unanswerable to everybody's situation, but to my own situation, yes, there are benefits to it, and I've learned to notice them and be thankful for having them, because without them I would take a lot of things for granted that I now will take a second look at.
What are your pet peeves that you hear about your condition on the daily, and how do you want to actually address it to people today in a way of abolishing it, or
It's funny that you asked this, because I would normally say no, I don't have any pet peeves about it, because I wouldn't think about it. But I just had a conversation with a buddy of mine the other day who brought up this same question, and we realized that we both kind of do have a pet peeve about PTSD. And the thing is, it's not even one that most people would think is there. My pet peeve with PTSD is that, yes, I might have it, and yes, you might have it, but yours does not always have to be worse than mine, or mine does not have to be worse than yours. We can understand and respect the boundaries that we both have it, and yours might be this way and mine might be this way, but that's the way it is. And that's one of the pet peeves that I've noticed, is that when I run into people with PTSD who, not all of them do this, and not really a lot of them do this, in my opinion, that I've noticed, but there are a couple that I've run into where it's like, mine has to be worse than yours. You can't feel this way because my PTSD is this way, and yours is no longer important. Which is not the case, because when we bring this up as a pet peeve, it's me and my friend will talk about it. Well, if something goes wrong, we'll speak on the subject, and we'll go over what happened and why we felt that way, and so on and so forth. And it's just our way of processing the information and kind of understanding that this is what happened to make that happen, so we don't have it do it twice. If it makes sense, like, we don't want to repeat the same mistakes. So when it comes back to it, we've had recently a couple of people who have come up to us that have had PTSD and automatically discredited the fact that both him and I have a different stage of PTSD. And just because we have it is not important anymore, because his had to be worse. And really, in all reality, I would say his probably wasn't worse than ours. But at the same time, both my friend and I can respect the fact that, yes, you have it. But on the flip side, respect that we have it as well. So I think when it comes to a pet peeve, it's more so just coinciding with others who have it, or not being discredited by it because somebody else thinks theirs is worse. Most of us will listen to you, and most of us will actually talk to you and compare it, just so we can be like, oh, okay, so this happens here in your life, but maybe if you tried this. So we all kind of want to help each other with it, for the most part. But that would be really my only pet peeve, is when it becomes kind of a pissing match, because I don't think it should be. It's just another part of everybody's life that we know. Like, my friend and I, we both have it. That's the way it is. And we understand that and work forward through it. But when it comes down to other people's lives, then it's okay, well, you might have it. Let's hear your situation so we can try and help. But, yeah. I think it's the pet peeve of respect. Respecting the fact that some people have it and some people don't, and some people's are actually going to be worse than yours, but just to give them the common ground. That's more where I would say any peeve of mine lies in, because I don't see this disorder as being something worthy of being a pissing match.
What would you give to people today about your condition?
It doesn't exist. Honestly, if I had to give the best advice for dealing with PTSD, is to get a counselor and a support group. And those two things right there will go a long way to making your life a lot easier with PTSD being in it. The biggest piece of advice I can actually give to anybody who deals with PTSD is pretty simple. And it's going to sound cliche, but find a counselor. A counselor, a therapist, something like that, and a support group. Those are two of the biggest things you can do to go in helping make your life more livable, more comfortable with that disorder on there. And the reason I say that is because a counselor is really, really good at finding what caused the issue in the first place. So once you find the main trigger, then it's a matter of you learn how to deal with it and learn how to disassociate the emotions from the trigger. And that will help you kind of deal with an everyday life and get you back into things and get you back moving. The other thing too is a support group. Like I said, I've got my support group, which is my family and my friends, and my friends have been vets who deal with the same issue. So when something comes up, I can look at them and go, hey, this has happened and I'm not quite sure what to do just yet. and they can sit there and go, okay, well, let's look at this idea or this idea or this idea, and it's just another outlook on it. Trying to get another perspective, because a lot of the times, one thing I have noticed with this is that I will see things and perceive things completely different than how somebody else will, because those triggers are there. So consciously having a support group such as my family to be like, hey, you're kind of overreacting here, it makes me, well, it forces me to step back and go, let me look at this again. And when you can start doing that, it makes your life a little bit easier to kind of live it and go on without having so many issues from PTSD. So biggest advice I can give is, yeah, find a counselor, find somebody you can talk to. And typically a counselor works because they're trained to do that, but just somebody you trust and somebody that you can confide in and go through those emotions with, that goes a long way to helping you kind of progress forward.
Can you describe in your own words what it's like living with your condition on the daily?
Yes, actually I can quite easily describe what it's like to live a daily life. It's very similar to how a normal person lives a daily life. It's just there. And that's what I keep trying to get at, is that yes, I have PTSD, I understand that, and some other people may have it worse than me, but really for me it's kind of just there. It's a part of my reality, and it's a part of something that I know is going on. But when it comes right down to it, no, it doesn't affect my life. I live my life the same way as pretty much anybody else does. I wake up in the morning, I put pants on, one leg at a time. I get a cup of coffee. Maybe you don't get a cup of coffee, but I always have a cup of coffee. And I go about my day, do my job, come home at the end of the day, hopefully interact with my family, sit around and do basically what needs to be done, and just enjoy myself. Or work and have my stresses and things that happen like that too. But I figure the best way to describe it is just a normal everyday life. You take a shower, you eat, you go do what you need to do, you live your life, you hang out with your friends, and okay, so there might be a moment or two where you need to step back and second guess it, or step back and get another opinion, but for the most part, I don't think that it's something that runs my life. It's not something that I would say really impairs how I live. It's just something that I have to take maybe one extra step a day because I may have misperceived something. So really, I'd say living with PTSD is just another part of a normal day to me. It's just a normal life. I enjoy it. I get to sit on camera and make people smile, and hopefully help put a smile on their face for a bad day. But really, it's just another aspect. Can't complain about it. It's there. Ultimately, no, I really can't complain or say anything's wrong with having it in my life. It's just a matter of it's there, and that's it. But I live a very normal life, and that's something I like. I live paying my bills, I put my pants on, like I said, and I drink a cup of coffee. And I do my work and hang out with my family and my friends, and I don't see any difference between my life that's what I consider normal to somebody else's life that would consider theirs normal. So I think it's all a relative aspect, but no, the worst I might have to do is second guess or take a second and take a deep breath throughout the day. And that's probably something that anybody really should do in the first place, I think. So. And
last but not least, what advice would you give to someone who is maybe in a relationship with someone with this condition of yours that they care about, or even if someone is just maybe more interested in a way of helping them in a way to build them up in a relationship kind of status?
So really the only advice I could give to a relationship standing of somebody who's with somebody during PTSD is that really what we're asking for is for you to be patient. And if you can be patient with us, we'll tell you what's going on and we'll explain it. But sometimes we just need a little bit of space to kind of deal with that. So typically we're pretty good about saying something when it comes to we're having a panic attack or something that's going on with PTSD. So when it comes down to the end point of a relationship, a lot of it tends to break down because people don't really understand. And just know that when we're dealing with that, we will let you into it. It's just how much we want to put out at that time. So I don't know. like I said, the only real advice I can give is patience. Patience is key with us, because we do react slightly different than a lot of people to a lot of situations, but for the most part, if we have it under control and we're willing to work with it, then yeah, it shouldn't really be a problem. So Espie, again, I'd like to thank you for having me on your channel. It means a lot to me, my friends, to be able to come in here, raise a little awareness for PTSD, and kind of give you a heads up as well as to what kind of symptoms we go through, and really kind of how it affects most of our lives, because I know most of my friends, it's kind of on the same level where we just, it's another part of our lives, and that's how it works and how it operates. But again, it means a lot for us to be here to be able to talk about it. We again appreciate you having our channel come onto yours. So I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you once again, Jessie, for coming on. And for those of you who are interested, let me know in the comment section below, or privating messaging me if you want to do this as an icebreaker, so that others can know about your condition. It can be mental health, it can be your general health, or what have you, so that we can get the ball rolling before, hopefully, in saying this, to do my documentary like videos as of next year, sometime in mid-January, end of January, if all goes to plan. So no further ado, guys, thanks for support, thanks for watching. Don't forget to follow me on my social medias. Also, in saying this, my merch online is still up there, and in saying this, that basically from the 22nd to the 24th, even though it's only for 3 days, look out for the discount code for your free shipping. So free ship 18. And all further ado, guys, also feel free to follow Jessie or support Jessie, as I said before, just to go on his channel once this is finished. And all further ado, guys, thanks for support, thanks for watching. Do what love what you do. Until next time, Aspie signing out, and I'll see you again soon.